Yeah, I hear you.
Can't do that.
For the past 2 years during this pandemic, I've heard a range of emotions from Anglicans, from the initial fear and anxiety to determination and courage, from discouragement and fatigue to even anger and grief. But in the last little while, as vaccines have rolled out, infection numbers drop, churches, schools, and businesses start to reopen, as a new normal starts to emerge, we're starting to hear something new. Hope. Hope is bubbling up again and people are starting to dream. I want to hear about those dreams. I believe in dreams and I believe that God speaks to us through dreams. Where is God leading us next? As we come out of this pandemic, what is next for us? On Thursday, March the 10th, we will be starting a new weekly lunch hour online gathering called Tending the Soul. It's a series of honest and hopeful conversations for the church and its leaders about ministry in this time. Every Thursday at noon, live streamed over our Facebook page, a small group will discuss with me or one of our other bishops what's changed in our church and what are we learning? Where are we finding abundance in the face of disruption? What do we imagine for the future? Each hour-long session will include a conversation between church leaders, both lay and ordained, on a particular topic, with plenty of time for questions and discussion. Together, we'll hear some of the stories and best ideas from across the diocese. We'll share what's tough in ministry these days and also how we see the future unfolding. We'll talk about some of the common questions, opportunities, and challenges facing our church. And we will support each other because honestly, we're all in this together. None of us is alone. We want to create a space for conversation that is both honest and hopeful. So please join us every Thursday at noon starting on March the 10th on the Diocesan Facebook page. For the full list of dates and topics, check out our events calendar listing on our website, toronto.anglican.ca. I look forward to seeing you online for these Tending the Soul conversations as we share our dreams, seed our imaginations, and discern together what God is calling us to do, to be, and to become as Christ's church in the Diocese of Toronto.
Hello and welcome to Tending the Soul this afternoon. I'm Janet Marshall, and the Director of Congregational Development at the Diocese of Toronto. The pandemic meant that our churches needed to learn quickly how to use different kinds of media platforms for ministry in ways that were really mostly new and very different for us. Today, we're here with Samantha Caravan, the Rector of All Saints Peterborough, and Ken McClure, the incumbent of St. George's Allendale in Barrie, and Bishop Priscilla Shaw. And we're going to have a conversation about what they've learned to support and extend their ministry using media as diverse as TikTok and radio. So we also want to hear from you as we go along. So please do enter your questions and comments, and we'll take as many of these as time allows. And so to get us started, Bishop Priscilla, would you open us with some prayer?
Thank you. Yes. Let us pray. O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were being cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. So as Janet has said, COVID has proved that we can go from idea to reality pretty quickly with innovations and improvements, trying, failing, and trying again. Even Jesus talks about innovation. He was very clear that we should try things from the Gospel of John, Later, Jesus himself appeared again to his disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. This is how it happened. Simon Peter, Thomas, called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, Zebedee's sons, and 2 other disciples were together. Simon Peter told them, "I'm going fishing." They said, "We'll go with you." They set out in a boat, but throughout the night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize it was Jesus. Jesus called to them, "Children, have you caught anything to eat?" They answered him, "No." He said, "Cast your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they did, and there were so many fish that they couldn't haul in the net. From the Gospel of John, chapter 21. I've often wondered if maybe Nathanael had said, "Hey, why don't we try the right side?" And Peter responded, "No, we fish from the left side." "But why?" Nathanael would ask, and Peter would give the answer every church member has heard throughout time, "Because we've always done it that way." It took the Son of God to get that to change. So our community is about building relationships. One of our goals with digital communications is to move from audience into relationship somehow. Learning together to pivot and adapt, being context sensitive. A useful little framework to conserve energy and be intentional is insights, ideas, and try. So insights, clarifying the questions your ministry is looking to answer, being curious. Ideas, where we be playful and creative. Try, be courageous. Better done in a team, get buy-in and support, better together. But being courageous when we try because we fail and we try again, or succeed and we try again. In digital, we've had many opportunities, live stream, YouTube, TikTok, radio, and today we're pleased to hear from the field, from Reverend Samantha and Reverend Ken, and our resilient and courageous Director of Congregational Development, Janet. So over to you all. Let's hear it.
Thanks so much, Bishop. I think we'll start with Ken today, and hearing something about what you've been able to do with kind of moderate technical resources and a whole heck of a lot of imagination.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an excellent way to articulate that. Moderate technical resources and imagination. That's kind of how the story worked out. Back 2020, March 15th, our first moment of having no ability to gather, we all naively thought that we were, going to be doing this thing for 2 weeks. And my parish did have, at the time I was in the parish of Halliburton, and we did have a Facebook page, so we were able to live stream, and we kind of maintained that live streaming of the singular platform for the first few weeks. But as we started to progress through time, it became very, very clear that this was not going away anytime soon, and that this was a new reality we were in. And so one of the ways that I began to respond to that was to try and focus on providing people with ways to engage with their faith, with their traditions, and ways to have a little bit of levity even in the scope of what we were all facing. And so I began to explore other things. I started to film, do pre-recorded things that would allow a little bit more opportunity for time and effort to put stuff out. And so I began on Good Friday because I was facing, as we were all facing, that question of how does one do Holy Week? How does one do all of that without anything? And I wanted to make it something special. So I took past dialogues that I had written, and I filmed little videos of them. And I recorded songs, and we put it together into a worship video that provided not the normative Good Friday service, but an exploration, creative exploration of what the Passion moments are. And that resonated, not just with my community, but with people outside, because as we were also discovering at this time, this digital thing, the social media networks allowed us to be able to reach people at a level that we'd never anticipated. And there was a solid response to that, and one that started to actually draw people into our live stream worship as well. And so I began to after the necessary time to debrief and to kind of calm down after Holy Week and Easter, I began to explore other things, and that included taking Gilbert and Sullivan tunes and rewriting the lyrics to be able to explore themes of church history or intricate theology. The first one that I tried was a breakdown of the Trinitarian controversies of the Nicene era, which, sounds like something exactly that you'd want to sing about. And it was to the Modern Major General's song from Pirates of Penzance, and that went what I call church viral, which is a lower numerical standard perhaps than what would constitute the textbook of viral, but it reached a large audience. And as I began to do more of those and other things as well, including the development of a children's program that took the methodologies and forms of YouTube videos that kids watch, things like video game walkthroughs and stop motion animation, and putting together a children's program around that, or explorations of literature. I did a reading series of where I was Screw Tape, from the Screw Tape letters by C.S. Lewis, and I also put a film together that of different classical Anglican writers like George Herbert's Sacrifice. I just started to explore, and that resonated not only again with this broader audience, but it began to bring more people into not only viewing our stuff, but their correspondences began with worshipers from across the Anglican Communion. I still have correspondence with Episcopalians from Hawaii or Ohio or Texas, as well as Anglicans across our country. Some of them became contributing members to our church through the different financial apparatuses that exist for being able to do that kind of thing. And it started to draw people in, and not only that, but make the congregation itself feel like they were not having to resign to not have to only embrace or exist within the loss that we were all facing. And so that's the kind of work I did, and it became really about creative expressions of faith and theology. And the lessons that I learned out of that, there are 4 real crucial lessons that I learned out of it that I'd like to kind of share. The first is that tech is not a barrier for creative expression. I am actually, although I hear, oh, you're a tech guy, I am a neophyte. I know nothing. My wife has to remember passwords for me and stuff like that. I just am no good with tech. But these are so intuitive now that even a fool like myself could muddle through and utilize the tech for things like editing. Apps are so intuitive that they are, if you spend a bit of time with them, they will help you to figure themselves out without you actually having to know anything about tech. That was a huge lesson for me, because I always assumed that tech was a barrier. It's not. It doesn't need to be expensive, and it doesn't need to be difficult. It's very intuitive. The second lesson is that multiple platforms are absolutely crucial. The Facebook stream was wonderful, except for that the amount of people who either didn't have internet or didn't have Facebook and didn't want Facebook for all sorts of very good reasons, right? And so it became very clear that we needed to not only have that as a method, but also YouTube. And for folks who don't have internet connection or that kind of infrastructure in place, we switched to also down where we didn't switch. We added burning things onto DVDs and mailing DVDs of what we were doing, including our worship services, to people who didn't have internet. And in some cases, we were able even to provide DVD players because they're real cheap nowadays. And it became something that we could even provide the tech that was necessary to be able to use the tech that we were sending people. And that created a community unto itself as they started sharing these DVDs with other people and one another. So we were sending 10 out, but we probably had 25 worshipers with that methodology. So that was the second. Multiple platforms, including old analog technologies and hard copies and things like that, get the largest reach. The third is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just kind of need to do your own version of the wheel. YouTube, all of the Facebook, we are all content consumers now on some level, and we are all exposed to different styles and methodologies, and we intuitively know these things because we watch them and we utilize them. Don't try and invent something new, just try and do your version of that, and what works within your skill set. And the fourth and most important for me, at least, is that public domain is your friend. using existing material that you don't need to pay for, that's a way to be able to do it in a fairly cost-effective way. So that was my experience, and those are my kind of the lessons that I've gleaned from that experience. And so I encourage others to utilize the skill sets that you got all around you, because there's so many different forms and methods and all of this stuff that you'll find something.
Thanks so much, Ken. That idea of being able to use so much but keep it simple at the same time, and be creative and really connect with where people are at, where people are comfortable in engaging on the other side of it all. So that's really interesting, and perhaps some other questions about that when we get along here a little bit. But first, I would like to pass the conversation over to Samantha, who in Peterborough had a very different sort of context and opportunity for reaching people in a very kind of classic and traditional way. So Samantha, over to you.
Thanks, Janet. Ken, that was awesome. I love this Anglican tent we live in that allows such diverse expression of who we are. I don't have one drop of your creativity, but I watched some of those and they were quite wonderful. We like everyone, like every church in Toronto, on the Friday night when we got the email, it was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We immediately pivoted to, the old, we'll live stream on our iPhone. We were so bad at that after 4 weeks, we just abandoned it altogether. But in the course of that, it didn't take long for any of us to figure out this was going to be a long-term problem, that we were like not having an open church. How were we going to manage that? So the pastoral team got together, and I had really one question. How do we keep people connected to each other and to the parish? Because if we don't do that, when we do come back, what will we have? We'll have a dysphoria of people who have not been connected or cared for. Much to our embarrassment, when we went through the parish list, we discovered that already we had left behind some people, shut-ins who weren't being cared for appropriately and weren't getting information. We went through the list very carefully and made phone calls and determined who had internet and who didn't, those kinds of things. It was somewhere around the second week when Cormac Culkeen, who's the director of youth and family ministry here, sent me an email and said, how about a radio show? And I was like, what? That is bananas. How do we do that? Cormac, of course, grew up here in Peterborough, went to Trent, participated in the Trent radio station for a long time. And so it really was not, it's so low tech. It requires a little recorder and Cormac, who is the brilliant editor who puts it all together. By the first week of April, we pivoted to a radio show, but we'd also added, in response to our going through the parish list, prayer cards, monthly prayer cards that were sent to every parishioner. We went through and made a really concise list of who needed telephone calls, so we wouldn't lose people again through the cracks. And then we sent out seasonal resources, including at-home resources like prayers and the readings for a season and things like this, so that we could keep people engaged. We had, like lots of parishes did Zoom coffee hours and stuff like that. Zoom pancake supper, all of those kinds of things. But the radio show has ended up becoming really, really quite remarkable. We have no idea how many people listen to it. It's not a number we can get from anywhere. The radio station doesn't know. But we know that there are at least 15 All Saints members who are now reconnected to their parish church, even from before the pandemic, because they couldn't get out. And now every Sunday morning at 10:30 over the radio, hear my voice and Suzanne's voice and parishioners' voices who read the lessons, and they occasionally hear recordings of the choir, and it's really been remarkably life-giving for them. We also discovered, because Trent Radio is it's a not-for-profit radio show, and it's student-led and all those kinds of things. The show that followed us, the show that was right before us and the show that followed us, clearly was designed for people much younger than I am, because the minute I would hear it, I would turn it off. I was like, I don't even know what that is, that music, that noise. However, what it meant was that people would tune in early for their radio show or would catch ours at the end of their radio show. And it's really quite remarkable how many young families have connected to All Saints through this radio show. We made a fairly significant decision at the beginning that until we were able to be all back together, we would only use forms of morning prayer, that we were not offering communion. I was not going to celebrate communion when I was the only one able to take it in a live stream context, because as we did come back, we added $40,000 worth of live streaming stuff where we pay somebody to run it on Sunday morning. So that's all fine and good, but we went low tech. We didn't know what else to do, and really our only goal was to keep this community hanging together through really a profoundly difficult and grief-stricken time, right? So we were able to do that through this radio program, and as it's grown, right? So we then added Saint of the Week, and we would interview people in the community. Bishop Shaw was interviewed, Bishop Asbill, when he was here, was interviewed, and those became part of the radio show. We have a parishioner here, Marguerite Cook, who was 108 years old. And so, we interviewed her, and people were just so delighted to be able to hear Marguerite's voice and know that she was well, and the same with other people in the community. So it really has been, surprisingly to me, life-giving in so many ways, to the point where, now that we're back in person, and we added so many things like lots of parishes did in the pandemic. And now we're kind of taking a hard look and saying, okay, what can we let go of? And the radio show is not one of those things, despite the fact that it's become more streamlined, but it's still fairly labor intensive, right? I mean, readings have to be recorded, sermons have to be recorded, Cormac has to edit it all together. It's no small undertaking. You know, it's probably the better part of 3 hours for a week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it chews into the rest of the time that we have, right? And so really that's kind of where we are and what we've done, and how we've just kind of hung it all together and tried to keep people connected and interconnected.
Thanks so much, Samantha. There's something really comforting, actually, I find, about listening to people on a radio. It hits something quite deep inside of me, and perhaps something about both the past, but also feels very, very present in the room. Those voices, and interesting conversation about the power of the voice and about the radio. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. We're thrilled that we're now joined by Jerlyn Henry. Jerlyn is the curate at the Church of St. Timothy, North Toronto, but soon to be moving to be the very first priest in charge of the newly amalgamated Church of the Holy Wisdom in Scarborough. And so welcome, Jerlyn. And I wonder if you would talk to us a little bit about your experiences of social media at a very kind of traditional North Toronto parish, but also how it's kind of begun to inform your ministry as priest.
Absolutely. First of all, I do want to apologize for my delay. I decided to take a trip, so I'm in a different time zone and didn't factor that in. So good afternoon, everybody. By the time I started my appointment at St. Tim's, they had already transitioned into Zoom with about 80 people on Sunday and like 30 people on morning prayer on Zoom every day. So I slid into a system that was already working exceptionally well. But the pandemic had many of us working multiple jobs, including my spouse, who at the time in March 2020 was working 3 jobs, one being on Sunday morning. So a few weeks as the leadership discerned like how to live into the pandemic that lasted more than a week and a half, 2 weeks that we anticipated, we decided to make these Zoom services accessible and inviting for those who didn't have Sunday mornings off. So our language of invitation kind of moved and grew from for those joining us at home to for those joining us at a different time in the week. We normalized that no matter where or when people are joining us, that it was good and valid worship. And then we moved to sharing snippets of our services on Facebook and Instagram. And we noticed that a whole new demographic of people were joining in, many of whom were anonymous to one another. So the first real gift, I think, of social media for the Church of St. Timothy is that it helped bring the church to where the audience was. Whether that was on a commute or on a couch on Sunday morning or doing a mundane task during the week, church was able to kind of seep into the cracks that the pandemic left in people's lives. And our engagement grew on Facebook 1,800%. It was like magnificent. And the second, maybe more tangible like impact or gift of social media for the church that I was a part of in the past couple of years was that we were able to interpret and reframe chaos as gifts of the Spirit. I remember our then rector, Eric Beresford, had envisioned a sort of call and response to the Lord's Prayer with 2 people that he had already picked out. However, those who had forgotten to unmute themselves or those who thought, oh, this is my chance to also unmute, did so. And it became this cacophony of prayer. As it fizzled, the words, "Thine be the kingdom, the power, and the glory," ended up being led by a single frail voice. A voice that many of us hadn't heard in years because that voice belonged to someone who was shut in due to illness. In moments like that, I think we don't always see the beauty of chaos. But in reflection, when we shared that little clip of prayer on Facebook, we were able to name that not as a failure of Zoom, but as an act of the Holy Spirit among us. So social media kind of allowed us to interpret and reframe chaos as gifts of God. The third, more tangible gift that St. Tim's received is that it didn't serve, or our social media didn't serve as an echo chamber for thoughts and ideas about God and the world. Social echo chambers, I think, are a trap for personal accounts sometimes. But at St. Tim's, there are 4 people who run our socials, and there's this age and gender and theological diversity and balance. I think each of us, all of us, have priorities in the way we experience God and see the world. And though often they're complementary, they're rather unique. So the way that the parish accounts are maintained, we don't all say the same thing. Like the clergy do not reflect the same thing that parishioners choose to share. And that kind of reflects and echoes the way that St. Tim's represents itself in the community, that we aren't one single voice, but we're a community of many voices that speak to each other and speak to the world about the way we experience God. And it created a greater degree of ownership amongst the church for who we are and what we say to represent ourselves. And sometimes we have to kind of remind ourselves about the values that we share, but most of the time, it's a diverse representation of what the parish represents in the community of North Toronto. Finally, I think I want to talk a little bit about, Janet, what you mentioned about my TikTok journey since becoming a priest. Growing up, I knew very little about what my priest was up to. It seemed like they would kind of just show up on Sunday looking perfect and looking holy and with no doubts or questions about anything. I realized a couple of months into my ordination that image was not true for me. Most Sundays, I find myself trotting to my car, trying not to spill my coffee on my vestments as I practice the tune of the Eucharistic prayer on my drive to church. But I liked it a lot. I liked this priest life with all that was difficult and wonderful and funny. So I decided to capture those moments, those quirky priest moments, and share that with people in hopes that it would create a space for conversation about faith and the church and what priesthood looks like for a young brown woman in Toronto. So I started a TikTok account about a year ago. And the content has greatly varied. Melissa, can you maybe show one video at this time, if possible?
What you doing? Where you at? Oh, you got plans. Don't say that. Shut your trap. I'm sipping wine in a robe. I look too good.
All right, that's just a little example of what was funny. Being in a North Toronto parish, it seems like when June comes, most of the parish migrates to the cottage. And it was a way to represent that in a way that's funny and accessible. The videos kind of range from how I felt going from my first interview as a curate, hoping to become a priest in charge, or how I'm curious about what's in people's backgrounds when they're on Zoom, and what the church did after the uncovering of even more graves in residential schools. And most recently, I think most profoundly, these videos that are quick and casual have had an influx of questions and conversations. One question and conversation being why do we think that Jesus was a brown person and not blue-eyed and white? That's also on the TikTok. It has given me the opportunity to speak about a God who is kind and welcoming and just in accessible music and accessible tones. The platform has offered an opportunity for people around the world where TikTok is legal to kind of ask questions and share vulnerably to the office of priesthood with the gift of anonymity. And you know the word anonymity, anonymous, that word. While it hasn't necessarily brought more butts into pews here in North Toronto, it has definitely brought more conversations about faith and God onto dinner tables and on couches and at home. In the past year, these videos on TikTok have reached or have had 200,000 likes and have just been 20,000 people have decided to kind of follow along and engage in these conversations. And that's been pretty holy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jillian. So this amazing breadth of different responses and creativity that we're seeing in our church in this time, the pandemic, so that our voice is still out there. Our communities are still being connected with each other and with the church and beyond. I'm wondering, actually, if you have any questions for each other at this point.
That video was solid, Geraldine. That's all I got. That was a solid video. I want to check it out. The rest.
So I think you're muted, Samantha.
There we go. I have a question. I wondered, here at All Saints, we had a really ongoing and still have an ongoing conversation about the ethical nature of social media and how we might use that in the church, because I mean Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, they're all rather predatory in their economic platform, right? And so we've had lots of conversations around here about how we use that responsibly. We do use it. There's no two ways about it. And sometimes I just hold my breath and say a prayer when I push post, but I'm just wondering how you've managed those kinds of conversations, or if they've been part of your conversation.
That's a great question. I think we've had the conversation about general values that we as a parish represent, that is in line with our mission statement and in line with who we want to be in that community. And there's been very few breaches of those values. And because the accounts are shared by young people as well as older people who have a diversity of opinions and perspective, it hasn't been predatory because there's multiple. I mean, from my perspective, it hasn't felt predatory because there's been multiple voices that offered a diverse opinion on similar topics.
Yeah, I must have not. I wasn't clear then. I'm not. I mean the platform of Facebook and its ownership being predatory in its economic ways, not our people and how we use it. We've done the same thing. What are we willing to post? What aren't we willing to post? How are we going to manage that? But I mean, Facebook in and of itself gathers information and then uses it and preys on people. So that's the kind of discussion of ethical values around that we've had. And maybe it's not, maybe it's a tempest in a teapot that we've created here. I don't know.
No, I think that's really important to consider. And it's one of the deep challenges that we face when we have accessibility questions, because those are the platforms that the majority are on. And I know one of the questions that we face with social media is how to moderate our use, right? And how to choose carefully so that we're not all consumed by it.
For me, I've the conceptualization of social media platforms, and in fact, the entire kind of digital infrastructure that exists, I see this as our time's agora, the gathering place of the Greek city-state, which was the center of the Greek cultural life. It was the center of, it was a tool of Hellenic conquest. It was the way in which the Romans, when they had conquered that infrastructure, utilized it to control the people, very much in the same way that that social media and indeed the digital environment is for us. It's also the place where the church was able to enter into those cultures as well, and that became the place where we really moved outside of the 12 folks following a dude around the Holy Land into the world, right? So I see a great deal of historical continuity in our not only the apparatus that exists, but also the conflict that exists there, right? Because in order to engage you in that place, you are engaging. You are, you're there. You might be doing your preaching right outside where the imperial cult offers up its sacrifices. But that's how the gospel has always advanced. You're on mute, Janet.
Yeah.
Oh, that is the chorus of the digital age, isn't it? Yeah. So we have a question from Denise Bard asking, is your digital ministry integrated or separate from your parish ministry? And do you have a social media minister? That's actually an interesting question, because especially as we come out of the pandemic and back into the gathered community, have we integrated the digital ministry, or is it something that was just a bubble on the side? Yeah. So what's your sense of this?
Well, I think for me, one of the questions that also comes alongside that is, how do we count? Because we very much like to count numbers in attendance and all this stuff. And I was joking before, like 3,000 came to church on Sunday. Like, how do we accurately represent? And that actually is over to you, congregational development, to help us figure this out. But I think it goes hand in hand with this question of digital ministry being integrated.
Yeah.
Or separated.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
For the numbers, I have a good Trinitarian answer. I use the rule of thirds. Whatever it is Facebook tells you is your view, it's probably a third.
So you only had 1,000 on Sunday? Oh, darn.
I think in our parish, from like the very beginning, like our then rector was like very adamant that this would be an interactive platform, that we wouldn't be like giving all the liturgy and all the worship to be viewed, but it would be an interactive, that prayers would have answers that the rest of the congregation hears from home. And I think like we've sort of maintained that as we entered into the come back to church phase, that we have these screens where people who weren't able to access the building are still part of like live worshiping communities. And I think also like when our language kind of shifts from just like those who are gathered here and now to those who are gathered everywhere and those we can't see, those who gather at a later time, I think that like that language integrates parish to more than just the four walls that like we're used to. And no, we don't have a social media minister. We have many people.
I think it's a great question. I think one of the things probably for lots of us, certainly parishioners in particular, when we hit the pandemic, was that we had to, and lots of people in the pew struggled with this, right? We're the church, even though we're not in the building. And that has brought certainly All Saints Peterborough some real growth and freedom in that kind of sense, that the building is wonderful and grand, and you know it really is, but we don't actually need to be in it to be a worshiping community, and we don't need to be in it to be the body of Christ, doing our work out in the in community. Our digital ministry, I like to think, is fairly integrated, and we have live stream on Sunday morning, and we have Zoom. Thank God it's Friday. We have a Zoom meeting, Zoom worship on Friday night. And so we have different opportunities for people to engage. And we also do not have a social media minister, unless that's me saying, we're not posting that.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because the question also suggests, is digital media integrated into parish ministry in other ways? And I think, Ken, you talked about people sort of being able to engage back, and Samantha as well, people kind of engaging back with what it is you're posting or what it is that you're broadcasting. And then is that then the threshold to a relationship that could develop into ministries that we would be more familiar with around, outreach, pastoral care, that sort of thing. Are you seeing this? Are you imagining this?
So I think it's a threshold for us, but I think that it's important for us to, important for us to understand, or at least to reevaluate our notion of what it is to be an audience and what it is to be a worshiper, and recognize that audience isn't spectator. I'm from a classical theater background, so audience is sacred to us. That is the congregation, right? And it indeed has a religious origin to it, the way we even conceptualize that. So I think that when you get correspondence back, when you get the kind of classical, typical points of contact that allow you to feel affirmed and know that you've reached that person individually, it's easier for us as individuals to go, okay, that's a person who's now a worshiper and not a spectator. I'm not going to say audience, I'm going to say spectator. But I think that as I said earlier, we consume content almost constantly now. And we engage with that which we consume in that way, in deeper ways than I think we even recognize. And so the way that, I don't necessarily know that a sermon in building has hit every member of the person, every member of the congregation. I know that sometimes I hear responses back from individuals, and I know that it hit them, but I don't know if it's got everyone, right? I don't know when people sing a hymn, if they're singing the hymn because it's a spiritual moment for them, they are praying in that threefold way, or if it's just that they really, really dig that tune and they really, really love that. And that's still authentic for me. I think that that's still real, but it's less affirming for what we want to have within our definitions. So I think that part of it is being comfortable with throwing stuff at the wall and letting it be taken up, and trusting in the Spirit's to in the authenticity of the Spirit's communication within those moments, recognizing that you'll never necessarily understand how the Spirit has communicated through you to someone else.
In 2020, we ran, aren't I generous with my inclusion? Cormac ran a digital summer camp, discovery camp, and there were baskets delivered to homes, and it was, a couple of, an hour in the morning and the afternoon, if I remember right, and all kinds of activities to do. And then last summer in 2021, we ran a kind of hybrid. There was a digital piece in the morning and an outdoor in-person piece in the afternoon. And this year we're moving fully to in-person camp, 4 weeks of it. And it's really remarkable that people who have never gone to church, parents who've never gone to church themselves, and children who've never stepped foot in the church, in any church building, are now worshiping members of this community, because we reached out in a time just in an effort to offer really just exhausted parents who'd been home with their children for months and months on school and Zoom and all these kinds of platforms, some brief opportunity for them to step aside while their children were engaged in something that wasn't a cartoon or something else they didn't want them watching.
Yeah. Elizabeth McCaffrey reminds us that we've got a number of tech volunteers who've been working diligently and hard over 104 weeks straight now. Yes, I used to in my notebooks say which week this was of the pandemic, and I stopped that about 3 months ago because it just got a little bit too depressing. But 104 weeks, and wondering about how do we give these people a break? How do we sort of extend the capacity maybe, and now that the demand is there, and so many places I go to, they're saying, you know, we can't give this up now that we've started it. And Samantha, we heard you say that.
Yeah.
This isn't going anywhere.
We started a program. We have choral scholars here at All Saints as part of the choir, and so we extended that and have tech scholars, young people who are interested in learning what it is, and it offers them an opportunity to engage in the mission and ministry of the church and get a small honorarium at the same time. And it has, for the most part, worked out well. I mean, can we use more tech scholars? Absolutely, but it's a really great way to engage people of all ages. Ours just happen to be younger.
That's really creative. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jen. So we've kind of encouraged those who want to put their ministries or share their ministries to come up with their own language and their own like icons for it. So like we have a knitting group, and they had the opportunity to kind of say what they wanted to put on the Facebook, or like have a say in what they wanted to put on the church sign. And it created not only this like, oh, they're going to deal with it, but if I'm leading or I'm a part of this ministry, then how I represent it for the church is in my hands. I have a voice in that. That's been helpful to kind of take away some of the burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an on-ramp to more engagement, to one step in, it helps. Yeah, Cormac is actually asking a really interesting question as well about how do we foster a different relationship with online church and content for our congregations when sometimes it feels like we're just another content creator competing with zillions of others. And I'm wondering, it was interesting because I was hearing a sermon the other day where somebody was preaching that we are not content creators, that the creator has created the contents, that we're the content expressors.
Well, some of that's true, right? Because we're doing this all to the glory of God, and we have the gospel, and that's the good news that we're sharing. But I think there is a real pressure that is put on people to be content creators.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of those challenges that we experience when we start something full blast and we have to backpedal a little bit. We find that in different seasons in our lives. We found that throughout the whole COVID season, but we really need to be able to step back just a little bit and take care of ourselves and take responsibility for our own self-care and moderating of our engagement with the chaos as we go forward, because we really do have to be able to keep going. We need to be available to get up tomorrow morning, and can't burn ourselves out today with that. So it's one of those challenges, is how do we moderate what we're doing? I don't have solutions. If I did, I'd be a millionaire.
I think this is a great question, though, and I mean, Cormac is the person I've been talking about, the very creative genius that lives here at All Saints Peterborough, and it's how there's different. I mean, some people, I have this thing. Maybe I shouldn't say it here, but I the cat's out of the bag. So where I say, you can belong here before you believe, you can belong and believe, and you can belong and never believe. So we allow people to engage with the content, whether it's, something as well known as the Savior's Prayer, or, a hymn, or some other thing based on what they're comfortable in engaging with, right? And I mean, the real challenge for me comes with making sure we're not pressuring people into some kind of expectation that we probably have and haven't voiced, right?
Yeah, I think I think I'd affirm both of the positions that were just articulated by both Samantha and Bishop Priscilla. I think that one of the most important things is recognizing that there are always seasons of rest.
Yeah.
Every other content creator outside of our place have moments of hiatus, have moments of pause, have moments between seasons. I mean, I'm in the midst of waiting the 4 weeks before there's another RuPaul's Drag Race that's on. Right? There are pauses that happen, and being okay with that, not feeling like that's like you need to be constantly filling that and doing that, recognizing that those seasons need to happen. I also think recognizing that we're not in competition with other content creators any more than I'm in content with other preachers when I deliver my homily, right? That's that we are doing what we're doing. We're speaking the gospel. I don't know that Paul had an end game for writing as many letters as he did, but he wrote them. And I don't think it was to form the network that he did form. It was that was something that the Spirit made out of the network that was happening through the relationship and through the content he was providing, if you will. So I think that recognizing that we are not in competition, nor are we really in control of it, is helpful.
Thank you for all of that. We're coming close to the end of our hour together, and
Yes.
it's been really exciting to hear the experiences, the risks taken, the things learned, and just to see some of the creativity that's in our diocese and in our leadership. And I wonder, Bishop, if you might just want to close us out with a few words.
Yes, thanks so much. I found that this was a great, energizing conversation. Some of the key words that leapt out at me were life-giving, encouraging, interactive, and there was a lot of words shared, so there were more for sure. But what I gleaned from this is that there has been a whole lot of hard work represented just here on the screen. So for everybody listening and also for you on the screen, I want to thank you very much for that and for your part in that, recognizing that it takes teamwork and that very often we're not doing it on our own. But we'll just close with a quick prayer. And it's a focusing prayer, helping us to remember, Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there's hatred, let us sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's discord, union. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there's darkness, light. Where there's sadness, joy. Grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
And thank you so much, everybody. And next week we'll be back with Tending the Soul, and that next week's conversation will be about ministry with children, youth, and families. So see you next week. Bye-bye.